I used to believe in loyalty, in love, in the kind of trust that makes you feel safe, like you can hand someone your entire heart and know they'll guard it as if it were their own. For 15 years, I believed I had that. My marriage wasn't perfect, of course, but I thought Daniel and I were solid. We built a life together. We had our routines, our inside jokes. And then, in a single moment, everything shattered. It happened on an ordinary Thursday. He told me he had a late meeting, one of those nights where I'd curl up with a book and wait for him to come home, but something inside me stirred an instinct, a gut feeling I couldn't shake. His tie was too carefully chosen, his cologne too heavy, and his eyes. His eyes wouldn't meet mine when he said goodbye. So I followed him. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I'd laugh about it later. But when I pulled into the hotel parking lot and saw his car sitting there, I felt the world tilt beneath me. I walked through the lobby with my heart pounding, every step heavier than the last. The receptionist barely glanced at me as I took the elevator up, as though fate itself wanted me to see the truth. The door wasn't locked. I pushed it open, and what I saw inside burned into my memory like a scar I'd never heal from. Daniel, my husband, with Claire, my best friend since high school. The two people I trusted more than anyone else in the world were tangled in each other's arms, laughing like the universe had handed them happiness at my expense. They froze when they saw me. Claire's face drained of color, her smile collapsing into panic. Daniel stammered, his voice cracking as he begged me to let him explain. But there are no explanations for betrayal. No words can stitch back a heart torn apart like that. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just turned and walked away. The silence was deafening, and maybe that was what scared them most. On the drive home, tears blurred the road, but beneath the heartbreak something else began to grow. It wasn't despair. It wasn't sorrow. It was colder than that, sharper, a quiet, burning fury that spread through me like fire. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I knew what I had to do. Daniel and Claire thought they had destroyed me. They thought I'd break, or vanish, or accept whatever scraps of lies they offered. But they were wrong. They hadn't ended me. They had awakened something in me I didn't know existed. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen. My hands didn't shake. My mind was clearer than it had ever been. I wrote down their names, and then I wrote one word under each: punish. This wasn't going to be messy or impulsive. No, I wanted something better. I wanted precision. I wanted them to feel the way I felt: shattered, humiliated, hollowed out from the inside. And the only way to achieve that was patience. So I played my role. I smiled at Daniel when he came home the next day, acting as though nothing had happened. He looked at me carefully, like he was trying to measure how much I knew. I kissed him, cooked his favorite dinner, laughed at his stories. And inside, I was memorizing every detail of his routine, every weakness I could exploit. Weeks passed. He thought he had gotten away with it, that maybe I'd suspected something, but I was too naive to confirm it. That was his mistake. He underestimated me. The first step was his job. Daniel's career meant everything to him. His pride, his identity, his whole sense of worth came from the respect he commanded in the office. I couldn't take that away all at once. That would be too easy. Instead, I began collecting late-night phone calls he tried to hide, receipts from hotel stays, messages he didn't delete quickly enough. I gathered them like puzzle pieces, slowly building the image of the man he really was. At the same time, I began planting seeds among our circle of friends, small, seemingly harmless comments. Daniel's been working late a lot lately, I'd say with a sigh. Or, I hope the stress isn't getting to him. He seems so distracted. I never accused him outright. I just let their imaginations do the work. People love a good rumor, and soon enough whispers began to spread. And Claire. Sweet, treacherous Claire. She thought she had stolen him from me, that she'd won some prize. She didn't realize she had become part of my plan too. I watched them from the shadows, never letting on how much I knew. I waited until I could see the cracks forming Daniel's nervous glances, Claire's guilty eyes. They were starting to feel the weight of their own secrets, and that was exactly what I wanted. Revenge isn't about striking fast. It's about watching your enemies unravel, piece by piece, until there's nothing left of them. And as I lay in bed next to Daniel at night, listening to his steady breathing, I smiled in the dark because this was only the beginning. The beauty of revenge is in the patience. Every day that I pretended to forgive him, every smile I gave him, every touch of my hand on his arm was calculated. Daniel thought he had fooled me, that I was too blind or too weak to see the truth. What he didn't realize was that I had already begun dismantling his life from the inside. It started with little things. A misplaced receipt, a perfume stain I planted on his shirt, a strange number that called the house phone late at night. Each time, I pretended not to notice, but I made sure he did. I watched the way his eyes flickered with unease, the way he checked his phone more often, the way he snapped at me when I asked the simplest questions. He was unraveling, and I didn't even have to lift a finger, but I wasn't satisfied. I wanted more. I wanted him to feel the ground crumble beneath his feet. And so I turned to his work. His boss was a man of principle, a man who prided himself on integrity and loyalty. He despised dishonesty more than anything else, so I crafted an anonymous envelope, carefully printed photographs, text messages copied word for word, receipts that told a story of infidelity and deceit. I mailed it to his office and waited. The fallout was immediate. Daniel came home that week looking pale, his usual swagger gone. He poured himself a drink before he even took off his jacket, his hands trembling slightly as he told me about rumors circulating at work. I played the role of the supportive wife, offering him comfort, brushing his hair back, telling him everything would be okay. But inside, I was savoring every second of his downfall. The more his life crumbled, the more I rebuilt mine in secret. I opened a new bank account under my own name, moving money little by little so he wouldn't notice. I met with a lawyer, one who specialized in divorce settlements and asset protection. I learned things I had never bothered to before, things about our house, our savings, his pension. Knowledge was power, and I was arming myself for the final strike. Claire was next. She tried to reach out to me, of course. She left messages, pleading with me to talk to her, to understand, she said. Daniel meant nothing, that it had been a mistake, that she loved me as a friend and never wanted to hurt me. But I ignored her. Silence was my weapon, and it drove her insane. Eventually, I answered one of her calls. My voice was calm, steady. I told her to meet me at a cafe. She came rushing in, her eyes red, her hands shaking. She reached for me, but I didn't move. I let her speak, let her beg, let her cry. And then I pulled out the stack of photos I had printed, the ones of her and Daniel together, the ones she thought no one had seen. Her face crumbled as she flipped through them. She whispered, "Please don't show anyone." "Please, I'll do anything." That was when I smiled, not cruelly, but coldly. "You already did," I said. Claire became another pawn in my game. She thought she was protecting herself, but every move she made only gave me more control. I didn't need to expose her, not yet. It was enough to watch her squirm, enough to know she woke up every morning terrified that her world might collapse. And Daniel was spiraling. His colleagues avoided him, his friends whispered behind his back, and he began to drink more heavily. At night, I'd find him sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. Sometimes he'd ask me, "Do you think I'm a good man?" I'd smile softly, touch his cheek, and lie straight to his face. "Of course you are," but inside I was laughing, because I knew exactly what was coming. The final stage of my plan wasn't just about destroying him. It was about making him destroy himself, planting doubts so deep that he couldn't tell reality from paranoia, leaving subtle traces, strange messages on his phone that I sent from anonymous accounts, shadows of figures following him home that I arranged through friends, whispers in the dark that made him question his sanity. And it worked. He started waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, gasping for air. He accused me, once said I was hiding something, that maybe I was seeing someone else. I let a tear fall, playing the wounded wife, and he crumbled with guilt. It was almost too easy, but I wasn't finished. Not yet. I had spent months weaving this web, and the time was coming to tighten it around him completely. Soon, he would have nothing left, no career, no friends, no reputation, and no sanity. He would be a hollow man, broken and begging for relief. And when that moment came, I would be there, watching, because revenge isn't about justice. It isn't even about punishment. It's about balance. And I was about to restore mine. Daniel didn't realize how much of himself he had already lost. Every day, his paranoia grew worse. He no longer trusted his colleagues, he questioned his friends, and he looked at me, his own wife, as if I were a stranger he couldn't quite figure out. That was the sweetest irony of all. He was right, but far too late. The man who once carried himself with pride now stumbled through each day like a shadow. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his once confident stride reduced to hesitant steps. He snapped at waiters, cursed at traffic lights, and paced the house in the dead of night, whispering to himself as though he were trying to untangle invisible knots in his head. And I fed his madness. I left small clues carefully crafted, never careless. A lipstick mark on his shirt collar that wasn't mine. A hotel keycard slipped into his jacket pocket. Anonymous notes slipped under the door at work. She knows. He began accusing Claire, at first gently, asking her if she had said anything, if she had been careless. But soon the accusations turned sharp, venomous. Their secret meetings became shouting matches. She called me one evening, her voice breaking as she said, "He's losing it. He thinks I've ruined everything. Please talk to him. Help him. Help him." I almost laughed into the phone. No, Claire. This was exactly where I wanted him. But her desperation gave me an idea. A final move to twist the knife deeper. I arranged a dinner, just the three of us. I told Daniel I wanted to invite Claire over, that I was tired of the distance between us. He looked at me suspiciously, but agreed. Maybe he thought this was his chance to mend things, to convince me that he could still be the man I once believed in. When the night came, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. I cooked his favorite meal, poured glasses of wine, and smiled sweetly as though nothing had ever happened. Claire arrived looking pale, her hands trembling as she held a bottle of wine like a peace offering. We sat together at the table. I made small talk, pretending everything was fine. Daniel forced a laugh here and there, but his eyes kept darting between us, filled with suspicion. Claire barely touched her food, her fork clinking against the plate as her hand shook. And then, when the silence stretched long, I leaned forward. "Do you ever think about consequences?" I asked softly, my eyes fixed on them. Both. Daniel froze. Claire's breath hitched. I let the question hang in the air, savoring the way it made them squirm. Then I smiled, a calm, deliberate smile. Funny how one choice can change everything. One secret, one betrayal. Claire put down her fork. "Please, don't," she whispered, but Daniel snapped. His fist slammed against the table, rattling the glasses. "Enough!" he shouted, his voice cracked, raw with fear and rage. "If you know something, then say it. Stop playing games." I tilted my head, watching him unravel right in front of me. "Games?" I asked. "I think you know all about those." The room went silent except for his ragged breathing. He stared, at me as though seeing me for the first time, and for a flicker of a moment, I saw the truth settle into his eyes. He knew I wasn't the blind, trusting wife he thought I was. He knew I had seen everything. Claire stood abruptly, muttering something about leaving, but Daniel grabbed her wrist. "You ruined this," he hissed at her, his face twisted with anger. "You couldn't keep your mouth shut, could you? Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't say anything." "She's not stupid, Daniel. She figured it out." Their shouting filled the room, every word another crack in the fragile facade they had tried to maintain. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my wine, watching them destroy each other. This was better than I had imagined. I didn't even need to raise my voice. They were doing all the work for me. Finally, I stood, my chair scraping softly against the floor. "I think we're done here," I said quietly. They both turned to me, their faces pale, desperate. "Please," Claire whispered, "don't tell anyone. Don't ruin us." Daniel's voice shook. "We can fix this. We can make it right." I looked at them both, the people who had taken everything from me, and I felt nothing. No sadness, no rage. Just a calm, icy clarity. "You already ruined yourselves," I said. And with that, I walked out of the room, leaving them alone with their guilt, their fear, and their unraveling lives. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. Because revenge, true revenge, isn't just about watching someone fall. It's about making sure they never get back up again. And I still had one last move to play. The storm always breaks after the silence. For days after that dinner, Daniel walked around like a ghost. He barely spoke, barely ate, barely looked me in the eyes. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at his reflection in the mirror as if he didn't recognize the man standing there. Claire had vanished from his life, too ashamed or too frightened to face me again. He had lost his lover, his peace, and soon he would lose everything else. Because I had saved the best for last, I had gathered every piece of evidence, every receipt, every photo, every trace of his lies and betrayal. I didn't send them to his boss this time. No, I went bigger. I leaked it all anonymously, of course, to his colleagues, his professional network, even his closest friends. Every person who had once admired him, respected him, trusted him. They now knew the truth. The whispers turned into stares. The stares turned into avoidance. Invitations stopped coming. Calls went unanswered. His career, once the center of his identity, crumbled in front of him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. At night, I could hear him crying when he thought I was asleep. Silent, broken sobs from a man who used to think he was untouchable, and still I didn't feel pity. I felt power, but it wasn't enough. One night, as he sat at the kitchen table with a half-empty bottle of whiskey, I joined him. He didn't look up, didn't say a word. I sat across from him, my hands folded calmly, and whispered, "Why, Daniel? Was it worth it?" His eyes, red and hollow, finally met mine. "I don't know," he rasped. I thought. She made me feel alive, and now his voice broke. "Now I've lost everything." I let the silence hang for a moment before I spoke again. "Not everything." He frowned, confused. "You still have me." The words were a dagger wrapped in silk. His expression shifted. Hope flickered for just a second, then crumbled when he saw the coldness in my eyes. He understood then. He understood that the woman sitting across from him wasn't his wife anymore. I was his judge, his jury, his executioner. The next morning, I packed his bags. When he stumbled out of bed, still reeking of alcohol, they were waiting by the door. He looked at me with disbelief. "Where am I supposed to go?" "Anywhere but here," I said calmly. His lips trembled. "You're throwing me out after everything." I smiled faintly. "Exactly. After everything." He tried to argue, to beg, but I stood firm. For the first time in months, I felt free. The house no longer carried the weight of lies. The air felt lighter. And as he dragged his suitcase out the door, I knew this was the moment I had been waiting for. But revenge doesn't end with a slammed door. The weeks that followed were my masterpiece. I cut him off from our accounts, claimed what was rightfully mine, and left him with nothing but debt and regret. Claire disappeared entirely. I heard whispers she moved to another city, maybe another state. Daniel tried to reach out once or twice, leaving drunken voicemails, but I never answered. His voice grew weaker each time until one day it stopped altogether. People asked me if I was okay, if I needed anything, if I wanted to talk. I smiled, told them I was fine, and for the first time, I meant it, because here's the truth no one tells you. Revenge isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's watching someone destroy themselves with the very choices they thought would make them happy. It's standing tall while they crumble, knowing you didn't just survive, you won. Months later, I saw Daniel one last time. It was by chance, on a gray afternoon downtown. He was thinner, his suit cheap and ill-fitted, his face pale and worn. He didn't notice me at first, but when our eyes met across the street, he froze. For a brief second, I saw shame flicker in his gaze. He started to cross the road, maybe to speak to me, maybe to beg, but I turned away and kept walking, because I didn't need to hear his words. I had already written the ending, and that ending was mine.